Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline from KnittingHouseSquare. In today's video, this is part 2 of my basket weave series. I'm going to be taking you through how to knit a simple basket weave scarf. So this is a great project for a beginner knitter or an experienced knitter. I take you through all the steps you need from cast on to cast off. So we start with a simple backward loop cast on. We work all the way up through the pattern. I show you how to work the knits and purls and how that works into a basket weave pattern overall to create the nice texture in your knitting. And then lastly, the cast off. This is part 2. In part 1, what I showed you was a much larger project. You can probably see it back here. This was the basket weave blanket. So if you're interested in that video tutorial, be sure to look for the link down below in this video. Now, as always, you're going to be able to find all the video resources and the full written version of this pattern on my website, KnittingHouseSquare.com. If you have any comments or questions along the way, be sure to leave them in the comments down below. And don't forget to subscribe so you stay up to date on all my future videos. So without further ado, let's get started on the simple basket weave scarf. Starting off with the yarn for this project, I used 1 ball of the Bernat felted yarn, and this is the colorway Ivy Fleck. So if you're looking for a comparable yarn, you're going to want a super bulky or a number 6 yarn, and I used approximately 200 yards, which I believe is about 183 meters of super bulky yarn. So again, this was Bernat, the felted yarn. In addition to the yarn, you're going to need US 11 knitting needles. This project is knit flat, so you're welcome to use straight knitting needles or circular knitting needles and just knit flat on your circular knitting needles. Again, whatever your preference is here. You're going to want a tape measure to measure your progress as you're going along to make sure you get the right length. A pair of scissors, and then a tapestry needle. You just need one. Either you just want to make sure it has a large eye because this is super bulky yarn. So a metal or plastic tapestry needle is your last piece of supplies. To get a scarf that's approximately 8 inches wide, we have to start off by casting on 21 stitches. So what I have in front of me is I have my knitting needle, and again, you can use straight or circular knitting needles because this is knit flat. I'm going to be using circulars because that's what I have available, and I have my yarn. So first thing we need to do is we need to be able to attach the yarn to the knitting needles. And to do that, we're going to use a slip knot. So to make my slip knot, I'm going to drape my yarn over my left hand with the yarn tail or the end of the yarn closest to me and the ball of yarn further away from me. And I just have probably about 10 inches or so draped over. Now I'm going to grab onto the strand with my bottom 3 fingers, and I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to wrap this around my pointer finger. So I'm going to go back behind, down to the bottom, up the front to the top, then back behind down to the bottom, up the front to the top, back behind down to the bottom, and now grab onto that strand with my other 3 fingers as well. So it's kind of like we have 2.5 loops around our pointer finger, and the way you can create a slip knot is you can rearrange these top 2 loops. So you're going to take the middle one and move it up closer to the top of your finger, so it becomes the new first loop. Then take the new middle loop, move it up closer to the top of your finger, so it becomes the new first loop. And then take the newest middle loop, slide that off of your finger, and now you have a slip knot. With this slip knot, what you want to do is you want to hold it, again, so the yarn tail is closest to you. And you want to take either one of your knitting needle points and slide your knitting needle onto the slip knot, going from right over towards the left. Then you can gently pull on the yarn tail to tighten that or snug that onto your knitting needle. You don't want it so tight that it won't move. You want it loosely on there, but secure. So that slip knot actually counts as our first stitch. So now we need to cast on 20 more stitches. So the way I'm going to cast on is using something called the backward loop cast on. Again, I want my working yarn further away from me. And I'm going to take my left hand again and put it behind the working yarn. Again, I want to grab onto it with my bottom 3 fingers. And now I'm going to move my hand so I wrap the yarn around my pointer finger. I'm going to go underneath the strand up the front to the top, back behind down to the bottom, up the front to the top again. So similar idea to when we were making that slip knot, just now we have like 1.5 loops around our finger. So to turn this into a stitch, what I want to do is I want to take my right knitting needle point, go underneath that topmost stitch or topmost loop on my pointer finger, slide it off of my finger and onto the knitting needle. And then again, just gently pull on it so it doesn't tighten but becomes secure on your knitting needle. Now all I have to do to make the next stitch is I go back behind down to the bottom, up the front to the top again with my pointer finger, and now I slide the new topmost loop off of my finger onto my knitting needle. And again, I can loop back behind down to the bottom, up the front to the top, slide the loop off of my pointer finger onto the knitting needle. If you ever accidentally let go, that's totally fine. You can reset up. So just take your left hand behind the strand of yarn, grab onto it with your bottom 3 fingers, and then you'll have to loop twice to set it up initially. So go down below, up the front to the top, one more time, back behind down to the bottom, up the front to the top. And now you can start sliding off of your finger and onto the knitting needle. So I'm going to continue this until I have a total of 21 stitches, including that slip knot, on my knitting needle. Now that I have 21 stitches, I'm ready to work the first row. So the way I'm going to work my first row is I'm going to turn my work. So now my knitting needle point is going over towards the right. And I'm going to now need my other knitting needle. So I'm going to hold my knitting needle with the work in it in my left hand and my free knitting needle with no stitches on it over here in my right hand. So the first row has a little star and then it says purl 3, knit 3, then another little star. And we want to repeat that purl 3, knit 3 over and over again until there's only 3 stitches left in the row. Then we'll purl the final 3 stitches. So you're repeating what's in between those 2 stars. Now, how do we work a purl stitch? To work a purl stitch, you want to put your right knitting needle behind your strand of yarn, and then you want to go into your next stitch or your first stitch on your left knitting needle, going from the back to the front, right to the left. Now I'm going to take that yarn and I'm going to wrap it up the right side of my knitting needle and down the left side. So let me show that one more time. I'm going up the right side and then down the left side of my right knitting needle. And now I'm going to pull on that strand of yarn to tighten it so that I can push the loop through. And I can slide that first stitch off of my knitting needle. So let me show you that one more time. So a purl stitch, we're going to go back to front, right to left, and we're going to take our working yarn, wrap it up the right side, down the left side, pull that nice and snug, and then what I'm doing is I'm pushing that loop I just wrapped through the stitch, and then I'm sliding that stitch off of my left knitting needle. So we've purled 1, purled 2, and now I have to purl the third one. So again, I'm going to go back to front, right to left, wrap my yarn up the right side, down the left side, and then gently tug on that yarn so that I can tighten it and push it through the stitch. Slide the stitch off of my left knitting needle. Now I have to switch, so I have to switch to a knit stitch. The way a knit stitch works is it's worked behind. So you need your working yarn first. We have to move it. We're going to go in between our 2 knitting needles to the back. And for knitting a stitch, you're going to go front to back and left to right. So I'm going to go front to back into the base of the next stitch and left to right. Now I wrap my yarn up the left side of that knitting needle, down the right side, and I pull it nice and snug in between the 2 knitting needles. Now I want to pull that loop through the stitch. then slide the stitch off of the left knitting needle. So that was knitting the first one. Now we have to then knit the next stitch. So again, we're gonna go left to right, front to back, into the bottom of that stitch. Wrap our yarn up the left side, down the right side, pull it nice and snug in between the two knitting needles, and then pull that loop through. Slide the stitch off of your left knitting needle. So we've now knit two. I have to do a third one. Left to right, front to back, wrap your yarn up the left side, down the right side, pull it snug, pull that stitch through, slide the stitch off of your left knitting needle. So now I've purled 3 and knit 3. So I have to start the repeat again. I'm going to start next with a purl stitch. Purls are worked in the front of our work, so we have to bring our working yarn in between our two knitting needles to the front before we work the purl stitch. So again, to show a purl, we're going right to left, back to front, then we're wrapping our yarn up the right side, down the left side, and we're pushing that loop through the stitch, sliding the stitch off of the left knitting needle. Back to front, right to left, up the right side, down the left side, and then push it through. Now purl 2, got to do one more. And now we've purled 3. Next I have to knit 3. So knits are worked in the back. So first thing I have to do is I have to move my working yarn to the back. And now I'm going to go into that first stitch knitwise. So I'm going front to back, left side to right side. Wrap my yarn up the left, down the right, pull it snug, and then pull the loop through the stitch. Again, left to right, front to back, wrap my working yarn up the left side, down the right side, pull it snug, pull the loop through the stitch, slide the stitch off. And one more here. Now I have to start the repeat again. So I'm going to purl 3. As I'm starting the purl 3, I'm bringing my working yarn to the front, and now I'm going to purl the next 3 stitches. Next up I have to knit 3. Going to bring my working yarn to the back, knit the next 3 stitches. Now that we have 3 stitches left, the pattern tells us what to do with these final 3. It says to purl the last 3 stitches. So I'm going to bring my working yarn to the front and purl those 3. Once I finish a row, I have to turn my work to begin the next row. So I'm going to rearrange my knitting needles so that the one without stitches on it goes in my right hand, the one with stitches on it goes in my left hand, and the one with stitches on it should be pointed over towards the right. So now when I look at my work, I have the next stitch I'm about to work is going to be this first stitch on the knitting needle I'm holding over here on my left hand. Setup row 2 starts off with something new, so it says to slip 1 stitch. This is actually a nice and easy thing to do. So all we're doing is we're passing 1 stitch from the left to the right knitting needle without actually working it. So I want to go into the first stitch on my left knitting needle, purlwise. So I'm going right to left, back to front, and then I'm just going to pass it from one knitting needle to the next. So I didn't knit it and I didn't purl it. I'm just passing it along. What slipping the first stitch of every row does is it creates a nice clean edge along the side of your work. Now it says to knit 2. So the nice thing here is our working yarn is already in the right place. It's already behind for a knit stitch. So now I'm gonna go into the first stitch on the left knitting needle here, and I'm gonna knit that stitch, and then I'm gonna knit the next stitch. Now the repeat begins. The repeat says purl 3, knit 3. So to start off with purl 3, again, I need to bring my working yarn to the front, and then I can begin my purl stitches. So I'm gonna purl 1, purl 2, purl 3, and then I have to bring my working yarn to the back, and now I can knit 3. And again, I start over. So now I'm doing purl 3, knit 3, and then I'll do another purl 3, knit 3 to take me across the rest of this row. Now again, when I finish here, I'm going to turn my work and rearrange my knitting needles. So I want my knitting needle without any stitches on it over here in my right hand, and left hand is holding the knitting needle with stitches, but I want it pointed over towards the right. Setup row 3 starts similarly. So we're going to start off by slipping the first stitch. In this case, right now our working yarn is coming out the front of our work, and that is actually okay for this row. So I'm just going to put my knitting needle behind it. And now I'm going to pass that first stitch the same way I did on the previous row. I'm going to go in as if I'm purling it. So back to front, right to left, and then just pass it from one knitting needle to the next. Then it says to purl 2. And then the repeat begins. So the repeat's going to be knit 3. So I'm going to knit the next 3 stitches. And then purl 3. So I'm going to bring my working yarn to the front again and purl the next 3. And I'm going to continue doing knit 3, purl 3 all the way across the rest of this row. Once I finish setup row 3, I'm going to turn my work again and rearrange my knitting needles. So those were our 3 setup rows. Now you'll notice in the pattern, it switches to talking about set 1 and set 2. Set 1 and set 2 each have 3 rows within them, and what we're going to continue doing throughout the pattern is we're going to work set 1 followed by set 2, then set 1 followed by set 2 over and over again. What repeating the sets over and over again is going to do is it's going to create this alternating pattern. So on my swatch here, what I have is my first 3 rows down here at the bottom is what we just did. Those were our setup rows. And you'll notice it kind of alternates between the bumps and the flat regions. So we have bumps, flat, bumps, flat, bumps, flat, bumps. Or if you look at the opposite side, right, it's doing the opposite thing. Then we're going to work set 1. So set 1 is now going to switch up the pattern. So anywhere we had bumps will now look flat. Anywhere we had flat will then have bumps. When we switch to set 2, right, it's then alternating again. So it's switching back. So set 1 and set 2 are going to be alternating between creating the bumps in our fabric and creating the flat portions in our fabric. The way knitting works too is it's going to be reversed on either side. So wherever you have bumps on one side, you're going to have a flat region on the opposite side. So for set 1, I just want to demonstrate the first portion of row 1, just to make sure you're slipping the first stitch correctly. So it starts off by saying slip 1, and what you're going to notice here is that where your yarn currently is it's behind your work. So when I slip my work, I'm going to leave it back there, and I'm going to pass the first stitch from my left to right knitting needle, and then it says purl 2. Before you purl those 2, you want to bring your working yarn in between your two knitting needles to the front so that you can purl and you won't accidentally end up with a yarn over then. So now we're going to purl 2 stitches. And now the repeat begins. It says knit 3, purl 3. So I'm going to bring my working yarn to the back and I'm going to knit the next 3 stitches. Then I'm going to bring my working yarn to the front, purl the next 3 stitches. So the rest of this row will be very familiar. We're just going to keep on working knit 3, purl 3 over and over again. And you will be noticing that because we're switching the pattern here, you're going to be creating bumps anywhere that you have flat fabric below it. And you're going to be creating flat stitches anywhere you had bumps below it. So that's a good way on row 1 of sets 1 and 2 to make sure you're working them correctly. Row 1 is where you want to switch the pattern. Now when I turn my work, now I can work set 1, row 2. So for row 2, we're going to start off slipping our first stitch, and then we go right into knit 2. So you'll notice here, I'm not switching up my stitch pattern now. I'm working exactly what was below it. So I just put the flat knit stitches right on top of the flat stitches below it. Then next up, we have purl 3, knit 3. So I'm putting the purl bumps right on top of the purl bumps that already exist. And then I'm putting the flat knit stitches right on top of those flat knit stitches. So you'll notice when I bring my yarn to the front and then I start working purl bumps or purl stitches create those bumps on your work. So those 3 purl stitches just made a new set of 3 bumps right on top of the other 3 bumps. Then when I bring my working yarn to the back and I knit the next 3, I just put flat stitches right on top of flat stitches. So knitting creates that flat texture. Again, I'm back to purl 3, then knit 3 across the rest of this row. Turning my work again. Now I can work set 1, row 3. It starts off with slipping the first stitch, and I have my working yarn coming out the front of my work right now. So I'm going to put my knitting needle behind it to slip that first stitch. And now I'm going to purl the next 2. And again, row 3, we're still just creating that same set of bumps. So now I just added more bumps on top of the previous bumps. And then when I start working the pattern, bringing my yarn to the back and working knit 3, I added more flat stitches on top of the other flat stitches. I bring my yarn to the front and I purl 3. I added 3 bump stitches right on top of the other bump stitches. So I'm going to continue doing the knit 3, purl 3 across the rest of this row. Now I can turn my work again to begin set 2. So when I look at my work and what I just knit, we did the 3 setup rows, and then for row 1 of set 1, we switched our pattern. So we switched from bumps to flat stitches. Then in rows 2 and 3, we kept the same pattern. So anywhere we had flat stitches, we kept working flat stitches. Anywhere we had bumps, we continued working bumps. Now when we get to set 2, we have to switch our pattern again. So we're going to switch from anywhere we were working flat to having bumps, or anywhere we had bumps to working flat. So on this row, when I slip my first stitch, I'm going to slip it with the yarn in back where it currently is. And then it says purl 2. So I have to bring my working yarn in front, in between the 2 knitting needles, and then purl the next 2 stitches. So I just added purl bumps on top of where I previously had flat stitches. I'm switching the pattern on these row ones. Then it says to repeat, knit 3, purl 3. So I just added flat stitches on top of bumps, and now I'm going to add bumps on top of the flat stitches. Turning my work now, I can do set 2, row 2. Now that we've switched up the pattern, we're just going to be putting flat stitches right on top of where we just put those flat stitches and bumps right on top of where we put the bumps. So row 1, again, just to emphasize, of set 1 and set 2 is where we're switching up the pattern. Rows 2 and 3 is where you want to continue whatever you set up on row 1. So here I'm slipping the first stitch and then I'm knitting 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue alternating between set 1 and set 2 over and over again until my scarf measures approximately 60 inches. And you just want to make sure you finish after you work a row 3. It doesn't matter if it's set 1 row 3 or if it's set 2 row 3, just as long as you finish after a row 3. Then I'll come back and I'll show you the cast off. Now I've continued working for those 60 inches and I just finished after a row 3. So it doesn't matter if it's the row 3 from set 1 or the row 3 from set 2. You just want to make sure you finish all 3 rows of one of those sets before you cast off. The cast off method that we're going to use here is really quite simple. The way it works is we're still going to slip the first stitch, and then I'm going to knit the next stitch. Now that I have 2 stitches over here on my right hand knitting needle, I'm going to use my left knitting needle to pick up the one that's closer to my hand, the first stitch here, and I'm picking it up, going from left to right, and now I'm going to take that stitch, slide it up towards the tip of the needle, and slide it up over and off the second stitch that was on there. So I just cast off 1 stitch. Now there's just 1 loop remaining on my right hand knitting needle. So next up, I'm going to start again. I'm going to knit 1 stitch. Now that I have 2 loops over here, I'm going to take my previous stitch, pick it up with my left knitting needle, slide it up towards the point, and slide it up over and off the second stitch. So now I cast off another one. We start again. So knit 1, and it doesn't matter what the stitches were below it. I'm just knitting all the way across. Then take the previous stitch, up, over, and off. And you do want to make sure you aren't pulling the stitches too tight as you're doing this. If you notice your cast off edge starts to bunch up at all, just each time you work one of the stitches, just make sure you gently pull on the right knitting needle so you have a little bit of space. So for example, if I knit the next one, I can pull on it real quick just to leave a little bit of space there so they easily move around. Previous stitch, up, over, and off. Knit the next one. Make sure it's nice and loose. Previous stitch, up, over, and off. I'm going to continue this all the way across the 21 stitches. Now once I get to the last stitch, I'm still going to knit it, take the previous stitch, slip it up, over, and off, and this last stitch remaining over here on my right knitting needle, I'm going to pull on it so that it becomes larger, and then I can slide it off of my knitting needle. And now I'm going to cut my yarn, leaving about 10 to 12 inches a yarn tail here. I'm going to take that yarn tail and I'm going to thread it through that remaining loop. That way when I tighten, it'll form a little knot at the end of the cast off edge. So there's my cast off edge. And again, it has a little bit of stretch to it, but it ends up being nice and straight and rectangular, which is exactly what we want. Last step here is we can weave in our ends. So for weaving in your ends, you want a large size tapestry needle. Doesn't matter if it's plastic or metal. Gonna thread my cast off or cast on, whichever one you're working on, onto the tapestry needle. And then what I like to do is I like to follow a stitch. So for instance, first I'm going to go up a little bit just to get a little ways away from my cast off edge. And let's say I pick this stitch that I want to start following. So I can see it goes up under this strand, then it comes back down under this strand. Right, so I'm basically repeating the knitting stitches that I can see in my work. Weaving it back and forth, up and down. Now, once I've gone a little ways away, I'm just going to cut that yarn close to my work. And now that little yarn tail is all hidden. So I'm going to do the exact same thing over here on my other edge. Thank you so much for joining me today as we knit this simple basket weave scarf. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're looking for a larger pattern now that also uses that same basket weave pattern, be sure to check out part 1 of this video series, which I have right behind me here, the basket weave blanket. So similar pattern, just on a much larger scale. I'll see you next time, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye.